Layla stood by the window, her slender fingers parting the curtains just enough to peer out at the empty street below. At 28, she carried herself with a quiet strength, her dark eyes scanning the neighborhood with a mixture of wariness and hope. Behind her, settled in his wheelchair, her husband Andre watched her with concern etched across his face. "Baby, come away from the window," Andre said softly, his deep voice barely above a whisper. "You're gonna wake Zion." Layla turned, offering a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm just checking, love, making sure everything's all right out there." Andre wheeled himself closer, reaching out to take her hand. At 32, he was a man whose dreams had been cut short by a stray bullet that left him paralyzed from the waist down 3 years ago. But his spirit remained unbroken, especially when it came to protecting his family. "I know you're worried about the break-ins," he said, squeezing her hand. "But we're safe here. We've got each other, and that's what matters." Layla nodded, her gaze drifting to the crib where their 6-month-old son, Zion, slept peacefully. "You're right," she murmured, leaning down to kiss Andre's forehead. "I just can't shake this feeling." Little did they know, as they settled in for what they hoped would be a quiet night, that their world was about to be shattered in ways they could never have imagined. The clock on the nightstand blinked 2:17 a.m. when Layla's eyes snapped open. For a moment, she lay perfectly still, straining her ears to catch whatever sound had jolted her from sleep. The room was dark, save for the soft blue glow of Andre's breathing machine. Then she heard it again, a faint scraping sound coming from the living room. Her heart began to race as she slowly sat up, careful not to disturb Andre. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet silent on the cool hardwood floor. As she crept towards the bedroom door, 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. Was it just the old building settling? A stray cat on the fire escape? Or was it something far more sinister? Layla's hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever lay beyond. Slowly she eased the door open, peering into the darkness of the hallway. That's when she saw him. A shadowy figure looming in the doorway of Zion's nursery. A scream caught in her throat as panic seized her. The intruder, startled by her presence, whirled around. In the dim light, Layla could make out the glint of something metallic in his hand. "Don't move," a harsh voice commanded. "Don't make a sound, or the baby gets it." Layla froze, her mind racing. Andre was still asleep in the bedroom, unable to help. Zion was just feet away from this monster. And she was the only thing standing between her family and unimaginable horror. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please don't hurt my baby." The intruder took a step towards her, and Layla could smell the acrid scent of cigarettes and something else. Something chemical and dangerous. "Shut up and do as I say," he growled, "or things are gonna get real ugly, real fast." As the gravity of the situation sank in, Layla realized that this night would change everything. The safety she had fought so hard to build for her family was crumbling around her, and she was powerless to stop it. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a nightmare that would test the very limits of her strength, love, and will to survive. The intruder's face was hidden beneath a dark hoodie, but Layla could feel his eyes boring into her. She stood frozen in the hallway, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "Here's what's gonna happen," the man said, his voice low and menacing. "You're gonna do exactly what I say, or your little family's gonna suffer. Understand?" Layla nodded, unable to find her voice. Her eyes darted to Zion's room, where her baby boy lay sleeping, blissfully unaware of the danger that had invaded their home. "Good," the intruder continued. "Now you're gonna go wake up your husband. Tell him we've got company. But if you try anything stupid, if you try to warn him or call for help, I'll make sure you regret it. Got it?" Again, Layla nodded. She took a shaky step backwards towards the bedroom where Andre slept. As she turned, the intruder's hand shot out, grabbing her arm with bruising force. "Remember," he hissed. "One wrong move and it's game over." Layla stumbled into the bedroom, her mind racing. How could she warn Andre without putting Zion at risk? How could they possibly get out of this nightmare? "Andre," she whispered, gently shaking his shoulder. "Andre, wake up." Andre stirred, his eyes blinking open in confusion. "Layla? What's wrong, baby?" She swallowed hard, fighting to keep her voice steady. We have company, Andre. Someone's here. Andre's brow furrowed as he pushed himself up on his elbows. Company? What do you mean? His words were cut short as the intruder stepped into the room, the metallic glint of his weapon now clearly visible in the dim light. Well, the man sneered. Ain't this a touching family reunion? Andre's eyes widened in shock and fear. He instinctively reached for Layla, pulling her close. Who are you? What do you want? The intruder chuckled, a sound that sent chills down Layla's spine. What do I want? That's a good question, my man. See, I've been watching you folks for a while now. Nice little family you got here. Shame if something were to happen to it. Layla felt Andre's arm tighten around her. She could sense the tension in his body, the helplessness he must be feeling. Look, Andre said, his voice surprisingly calm. If it's money you want, we don't have much, but... Money, the intruder interrupted. Nah, man, this ain't about money. This is about something much more valuable. He stepped closer, looming over the bed. See, I've got a little proposition for you two. A game, if you will. And if you play nice, maybe, just maybe, you'll all make it out of this alive. Layla's blood ran cold at his words. What kind of sick game did this monster have in mind? What kind of game? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The intruder's lips curled into a cruel smile. Oh, you'll see. But first, let's make sure everyone's comfortable, shall we? With that, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a roll of duct tape. The sound of it tearing filled the room, a chilling precursor to the horror that was about to unfold. As the intruder began to bind Andre's hands, Layla realized that their nightmare was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The intruder worked methodically, securing Andre to his wheelchair with the duct tape. Layla watched in helpless horror, her mind racing for a way out of this nightmare. But with Zion just rooms away and this madman holding all the cards, she knew they had to tread carefully. There we go, the intruder said, stepping back to admire his handiwork. Now, ain't that cozy? Andre's jaw clenched, his eyes burning with a mixture of fear and fury. Whatever you're planning, man, just leave my family out of it. Do what you want with me, but... The intruder cut him off, wagging a finger. That's not how this works, big man. See, your family? They're the whole point of our little game. He turned to Layla, who instinctively took a step back. Now, sweetheart, why don't you go fetch that little bundle of joy? It's time for a family meeting. Layla's heart dropped. Please, she begged. He's just a baby. He has nothing to do with this. The intruder's eyes hardened. Did I stutter? Go. Get the baby now. With trembling legs, Layla made her way to Zion's room. As she lifted her sleeping son from his crib, she whispered a silent prayer, begging for strength, for protection, for a miracle. When she returned to the bedroom, the intruder had pulled up a chair, sitting across from Andre. He motioned for Layla to sit on the bed. Perfect, he said, his eyes gleaming with a sick excitement. Now, let me explain the rules of our game. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. You see, I've been watching you folks for a while now. Such a picture-perfect little family. The devoted wife, the strong husband, the innocent baby. But we all know that perfection is just an illusion, don't we? Layla clutched Zion closer, her body trembling. Andre's hands clenched into fists, straining against his bonds. So here's what's gonna happen, the intruder continued. We're gonna play a little game of truth or consequences. I'm gonna ask some questions, and you're gonna answer them. Honestly. And if I think you're lying... He trailed off, his gaze drifting meaningfully towards Zion. You're sick, Andre spat. You won't get away with this. The intruder laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Oh, but I already have. See, no one's coming to save you. It's just us here, having a nice little chat. So, shall we begin? He turned to Layla, his eyes raking over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Let's start with you, sweetheart. Tell me, do you ever regret marrying a cripple? Layla's eyes widened in shock. No, I love Andre. How dare you? The intruder interrupted. Remember, honesty is key here. Think carefully before you answer. After all, there's a lot at stake. As the weight of the situation settled over them, Layla realized that this was more than just a home invasion. This was a calculated attack on their very foundation as a family. And as the night wore on, she would be forced to confront truths she had long buried and face challenges that would test the very limits of her love and loyalty. The game had begun, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The room fell into a tense silence as Layla struggled to find her voice. The intruder's question hung in the air, a poisonous cloud threatening to suffocate them all. She could feel Andre's eyes on her, could sense the fear and hurt radiating from him. Layla began, her voice barely above a whisper. I love Andre, more than anything. The intruder leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. That's not what I asked, sweetheart. Do you regret it? Tying yourself to a man who can't even walk? Layla's eyes burned with unshed tears. She looked at Andre, saw the pain etched across his face, and knew that her next words could either save them or destroy everything they had built together. Sometimes, she admitted, her voice cracking. Sometimes I wonder what our life would be like if things were different. If Andre could run with Zion in the park, if we could dance together like we used to. But I don't regret marrying him. Not for a second. The intruder clapped his hands together, a look of sick satisfaction on his face. Now we're getting somewhere. See how easy that was? Honesty feels good, doesn't it? Andre's face was a mask of anguish. Layla, baby, you don't have to. Shut up, the intruder snapped. It's not your turn yet, Wheels. In fact, I think it's time we hear from the little lady again. Tell me, Layla, have you ever thought about leaving? About taking that sweet little baby and starting over with someone whole? Layla felt as though she had been punched in the gut. She looked down at Zion, sleeping peacefully in her arms, blissfully unaware of the nightmare unfolding around him. Then she looked at Andre, the man she had promised to love in sickness and in health, for better or for worse. Yes, she whispered, the admission tearing at her heart. Once, right after the accident, I was scared and angry, and I didn't know if I could handle it all. But it was just a moment of weakness. I've never seriously considered leaving Andre. The room fell silent once more, the weight of Layla's confession hanging heavy in the air. Andre's eyes were closed, his jaw clenched tight. The intruder leaned forward, his eyes glittering with malice. Well, he said. Isn't this interesting? Seems like there's more to this perfect little family than meets the eye. But we're just getting started, folks. Oh yes, we've got a long night ahead of us. As the intruder turned his attention to Andre, Layla felt a wave of despair wash over her. She had always prided herself on her strength, on her ability to keep their family together through the toughest of times. But now, faced with this cruel game of truth and consequences, she wondered if the foundations of their love were strong enough to withstand the storm. Little did she know, the worst was yet to come. As the night wore on, more secrets would be revealed, more wounds would be opened, and the very fabric of their family would be tested in ways they never thought possible. In the darkness of that Atlanta night, Layla, Andre, and little Zion were about to embark on a harrowing journey that would either break them apart or forge them into something stronger than they ever imagined. The intruder's gaze shifted to Andre, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Now then, big man, he said, leaning forward. Let's hear from you. How does it feel, knowing your wife has thought about leaving you? Knowing she might be better off without you? Andre's jaw clenched, his eyes burning with a mixture of pain and defiance. He glanced at Layla, who sat frozen on the bed, clutching Zion to her chest. When he spoke, his voice was low and steady. It hurts, he admitted, but I've always known Layla deserved better than this. Better than a broken man who can't even protect his own family. The intruder's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. Oh ho, now we're cooking with gas. Tell me more, Wheels. What else are you hiding behind that strong, silent facade? Andre took a deep breath, his hands clenching into fists against the armrests of his wheelchair. You want the truth? Fine. Every day I wake up hating myself, hating this chair, hating the fact that I can't be the man Layla needs, the father Zion deserves. But you know what? That hate, that anger, it's nothing compared to the love I have for them. Layla let out a choked sob, her eyes meeting Andre's across the room. In that moment, despite the horror of their situation, a current of understanding passed between them, a reminder of the bond that had carried them through the darkest of times. The intruder, however, was far from satisfied. Touching, he sneered. But let's dig a little deeper, shall we? Tell me, Andre, have you ever wished you died in that shooting instead of ending up in that chair? The question hung in the air like a physical presence, sucking the oxygen from the room. Layla held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it would wake Zion. Andre's eyes closed, his face a mask of pain. When he opened them again, they were filled with a raw, haunting honesty. "Yes," he whispered. "God help me. Yes. There have been nights when I've lain awake, wishing that bullet had been 2 inches higher. Nights when I've thought Layla and Zion would be better off with my life insurance than with this." The admission seemed to hang in the air, a tangible thing that threatened to suffocate them all. Layla felt as though her heart was being torn from her chest. She wanted to go to Andre, to hold him, to remind him of all the reasons she loved him. But the intruder's presence kept her rooted to the spot, a silent witness to this cruel unraveling of their deepest fears and insecurities. Well, the intruder said, a satisfaction in his voice. "Isn't this illuminating? Such deep, dark thoughts hiding behind those picture-perfect smiles. But we're not done yet, folks. Oh no, we're just getting to the good part." He stood up suddenly, causing Layla to flinch and Zion to stir in her arms. The intruder paced the room, his energy palpable, almost manic. "You see," he continued, "this is what I love about my little games. We strip away all the pretense, all the lies we tell ourselves and each other. We get down to the raw, ugly truth. And sometimes, that truth is more devastating than any physical pain I could inflict." He stopped in front of Layla, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face. She recoiled, her entire body trembling. "Don't touch her," Andre growled, straining against his bonds. The intruder laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Or what, Wheels? What are you gonna do? Face it, you're powerless. You can't protect her. You can't protect your son. All you can do is sit there and watch." As the words hung in the air, a chilling realization dawned on Layla. This wasn't just about physical violation or robbery. This intruder was here to break them, to shatter the very foundations of their family. And as the night wore on, she feared he might succeed. Little did they know, the cruelest test was yet to come, a test that would push them to the very limits of their love, their loyalty, and their will to survive. The intruder's eyes gleamed with a twisted excitement as he turned back to Layla. "Now, my dear," he said, his voice dripping with false sweetness, "it's time for the main event, the ultimate test of love and loyalty." Layla clutched Zion tighter, her heart racing. What do you mean?" The man's lips curled into a cruel smile. "It's simple, really. You're gonna make a choice that will determine the fate of your little family." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, clear vial filled with a colorless liquid. "See this? It's a little cocktail I whipped up, completely untraceable, completely lethal, and you, my dear, are going to decide who gets it." The room fell silent, save for the sound of Andre's labored breathing and Zion's soft coos. Layla felt as though the floor had dropped out from beneath her. "What are you talking about?" Andre demanded, his voice hoarse with fear and anger. The intruder ignored him, his eyes locked on Layla. "Here's the deal, sweetheart. You have 3 options. Option 1, you take the poison yourself. You die, but your husband and son live. Option 2, your husband takes it. He dies, but you and the baby get to start that new life you've thought about. Or option 3, the baby gets it. You and your husband live, free to try again for a child that isn't tainted by the memory of this night." Layla felt the bile rise in her throat. "You're insane," she whispered. I can't." "Oh, but you must," the intruder insisted. "And if you refuse to choose, well, then I'll just have to kill all 3 of you, slowly, painfully, starting with the little one." Andre's voice cut through the haze of terror. "Layla, baby, listen to me. You take Zion and you run. You hear me? You take our son and you get out of here." The intruder laughed. "How noble, but I'm afraid that's not an option, Wheels. She chooses or everyone dies. It's that simple." Layla's mind raced, searching desperately for a way out. But as the seconds ticked by, she realized with growing horror that there was no escape, no rescue coming, no last-minute miracle. She looked at Andre, the man she had promised to love for better or for worse. She saw the pain in his eyes, the guilt, the love. Then she looked down at Zion, innocent and unaware, his whole life ahead of him. And in that moment, with her heart breaking into a million pieces, Layla made her choice. "Me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll take it." Andre shouted, struggling against his bonds. "Layla, don't do this, please." The intruder's eyes lit up with sick glee. Well, The devoted wife and mother sacrificing herself for her family. How poetic. He held out the vial, his hand steady. Go on then, sweetheart. Drink up. Layla's hand trembled as she reached for the vial. She looked at Andre one last time, trying to memorize every detail of his face. I love you, she whispered. Both of you. More than anything in this world. As she brought the vial to her lips, time seemed to slow down. She could hear Andre's anguished cries, could feel Zion's warmth against her chest. She closed her eyes, ready to embrace the darkness. But before the liquid could touch her lips, a deafening crash echoed through the apartment. The bedroom door burst open, and a flood of light filled the room. Police! Don't move! In the chaos that followed, Layla barely registered what was happening. The vial was knocked from her hand, shattering on the floor. The intruder was tackled to the ground, his cruel laughter turning to curses and threats. As officers swarmed the room, Layla found herself enveloped in Andre's arms, Zion sandwiched between them. They clung to each other, sobbing, the full weight of what they had just endured crashing over them like a tidal wave. In the days and weeks that followed, they would learn the full story. A neighbor had heard the commotion and called the police. The intruder, it turned out, was a serial offender, targeting families he deemed perfect in a twisted attempt to prove that no one was above corruption. But in that moment, as the first light of dawn began to filter through the windows, none of that mattered. All that mattered was that they were alive. They were together, and they had survived the unthinkable. As the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion, Layla looked at Andre. In his eyes she saw not judgment or resentment for the truths that had been revealed, but a deep, abiding love. A love that had been tested in the crucible of that terrible night and emerged stronger than ever. We're going to be okay, Andre whispered, his voice hoarse but determined. We're going to get through this, together. And as Layla nodded, holding her family close, she knew that he was right. They had faced the darkest night of their lives and come out the other side. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one. For in the end, it wasn't the absence of struggle that defined their love, but the strength to weather any storm. Hand in hand, heart to heart. In the days following that harrowing night, Layla, Andre, and little Zion found themselves adrift in a sea of emotions. The physical danger had passed, but the psychological scars ran deep, threatening to unravel the very fabric of their family. They moved out of their apartment, unable to bear the memories that lingered in every corner. A small house on the outskirts of Atlanta became their refuge, a place to heal and rebuild. But the journey was far from easy. Nightmares plagued them both. Layla would wake up screaming, convinced that the intruder was standing over Zion's crib. Andre would jolt awake in a cold sweat, reliving the moment when he thought he was about to lose everything he loved. During the day, they moved around each other like ghosts, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy between them. The truths that had been forced out during that terrible night, Layla's fleeting thoughts of leaving, Andre's wish that he had died instead of being paralyzed, seemed to have opened a chasm between them. It was Zion, in his innocent, unaware state, who became their lifeline. His needs, his smiles, his simple joy in existing, these things gave Layla and Andre a reason to keep going, to keep trying, even when it felt like the darkness would swallow them whole. 2 weeks after the incident, as they sat in tense silence during dinner, Zion knocked over his sippy cup. The clatter of plastic on tile shattered the quiet, and suddenly, inexplicably, Layla began to laugh. It started as a small chuckle and grew into full-bodied laughter, tears streaming down her face. Andre stared at her in shock for a moment before he too was overcome. They laughed until their sides hurt, until they could barely breathe. The absurdity of laughing over spilled milk in the face of all they had endured hitting them like a tidal wave. As their laughter subsided, replaced by soft hiccups and sniffles, Layla met Andre's eyes across the table. For the first time since that night, she really saw him, not as a victim or a burden, but as the man she had fallen in love with, the father of her child, her partner in all things. "We need to talk," she said softly. "Really talk." Andre nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "Yeah, we do." That night, after putting Zion to bed, they sat together on the porch swing. The Atlanta night was warm and humid, fireflies dancing in the yard before them. For a long moment, neither spoke, the weight of all that needed to be said pressing down on them. Finally, Layla broke the silence. "I need you to know," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "that I meant what I said that night. I love you, Andre, more than anything. Those thoughts I had, they were moments of weakness, of fear. They don't define how I feel about you, about us." Andre reached out, taking her hand in his. "I know, baby, and I need you to know that I don't regret a single day with you in Zion. Not one. Even with all the challenges, all the pain, you two are the best thing that ever happened to me." Tears slid down Layla's cheeks as she squeezed his hand. "We can't let what happened that night destroy us," she said. "We can't let that monster win." Andre nodded, his own eyes glistening. "We won't. But Layla, we can't pretend it didn't happen either. We need to face this head on, all of it." And so, under the canopy of stars, they talked. Really talked, for the first time in weeks. About their fears, their insecurities, their hopes for the future. About the guilt Andre carried for not being able to protect them, and the pressure Layla felt to be strong for everyone. About the nightmares that haunted them and the dreams they still clung to. As the night wore on, something shifted between them. The chasm that had opened began to close, not erased, but bridged by understanding, by honesty, by a love that had been tested in fire and emerged stronger. When the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, Layla and Andre sat with their arms around each other, exhausted but lighter than they had felt in weeks. "We're going to be okay," Layla murmured, echoing Andre's words from that terrible night. "Aren't we?" Andre kissed her forehead gently. "Yeah, baby, we are. It won't be easy, but we'll get through this, together." As they made their way back inside, ready to face another day, they knew that the road ahead would be long and challenging. There would be therapy sessions to attend, both individually and as a couple. There would be good days and bad days, moments of progress and setbacks. But they also knew that they had something powerful on their side, a love that had been forged in the crucible of unimaginable adversity. A love that had looked into the face of its deepest fears and darkest truths and chosen to endure. In the soft light of morning, as Zion's happy babbles drifted from the nursery, Layla and Andre shared a look of quiet determination. They had survived the night. Now it was time to embrace the dawn, to rebuild, to thrive. For in the end, their story was not one of victimhood, but of resilience. Not of broken dreams, but of new beginnings. It was a testament to the enduring power of love, family, and the human spirit. A reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can bloom, stronger and more beautiful than ever before. As the weeks turned into months, Layla, Andre, and Zion slowly began to find their new normal. The path to healing was neither straight nor easy, but with each passing day, they took small steps forward. They started seeing a therapist, Dr. Elaine Watkins, a compassionate woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice. At first, the sessions were grueling, forcing them to confront memories and emotions they'd rather have buried. But gradually, they began to see the value in facing their trauma head-on. "Healing isn't about forgetting," Dr. Watkins would often say. "It's about integrating your experiences into your life story in a way that allows you to move forward." For Layla, this meant confronting her guilt over the fleeting thoughts she'd had about leaving Andre. Through therapy, she came to understand that these thoughts didn't make her a bad wife or a bad person. They were a natural response to a challenging situation. "You chose to stay," Dr. Watkins reminded her. "You chose love every single day. That's what matters." Andre, too, had his own demons to face. The feeling of helplessness he'd experienced that night had reawakened all the insecurities he'd battled since the shooting that left him paralyzed. But with time and support, he began to see his strength in a new light. "Your worth isn't measured by your ability to walk," Layla told him one night, her hands cupping his face. "It's measured by the love in your heart, the strength of your character. And in those things, Andre, you are the strongest man I know." Slowly but surely, they began to reclaim their lives. They installed a state-of-the-art security system in their new home, not out of fear, but as a practical step towards peace of mind. Layla took self-defense classes, finding empowerment in learning to protect herself and her family. Andre threw himself into physical therapy with renewed determination. He might not be able to walk, but he was determined to be as strong and capable as possible. He even started mentoring other individuals with spinal cord injuries, finding purpose in helping others navigate the challenges he had faced. Zion, blissfully unaware of the trauma that had touched their lives, continued to grow and thrive. His first steps, his first words, each milestone was a reminder of the joy and hope that still existed in their world. As summer faded into fall, Layla and Andre decided it was time to take another step in their healing journey. They organized a small gathering in their backyard, inviting close friends and family who had supported them through the darkest times. The afternoon was filled with the sound of laughter, the smell of barbecue, and the warmth of loved ones. As Layla watched Andre playing with Zion, their son's delighted giggles filling the air, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. Later, as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Layla stood to address their friends and family. Her voice shook slightly as she began to speak, but grew stronger with each word. "A few months ago, our world was shattered," she said. "We faced a nightmare that no family should ever have to endure. For a while, we weren't sure if we'd ever feel whole again." She paused, her eyes finding Andre's in the crowd. He nodded encouragingly, his love shining in his eyes. "But standing here today, surrounded by all of you, I realize something. We are not defined by what happened to us. We are defined by how we chose to rise above it, by the love that carried us through the darkest hour." As the weeks turned into months, Layla, Andre, and Zion slowly began to find their new normal. The path to healing was neither straight nor easy, but with each passing day, they took small steps forward. They started seeing a therapist, Dr. Elaine Watkins, a compassionate woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice. At first, the sessions were grueling, forcing them to confront memories and emotions they'd rather have buried. But gradually, they began to see the value in facing their trauma head-on. "Healing isn't about forgetting," Dr. Watkins would often say. "It's about integrating your experiences into your life story in a way that allows you to move forward." For Layla, this meant confronting her guilt over the fleeting thoughts she'd had about leaving Andre. Through therapy, she came to understand that these thoughts didn't make her a bad wife or a bad person. They were a natural response to a challenging situation. "You chose to stay," Dr. Watkins reminded her. "You chose love, every single day. That's what matters." Andre, too, had his own demons to face. The feeling of helplessness he'd experienced that night had reawakened all the insecurities he'd battled since the shooting that left him paralyzed. But with time and support, he began to see his strength in a new light. "Your worth isn't measured by your ability to walk," Layla told him one night, her hands cupping his face. "It's measured by the love in your heart, the strength of your character. And in those things, Andre, you are the strongest man I know." Slowly but surely, they began to reclaim their lives. They installed a state-of-the-art security system in their new home, not out of fear, but as a practical step towards peace of mind. Layla took self-defense classes, finding empowerment in learning to protect herself and her family. Andre threw himself into physical therapy with renewed determination. He might not be able to walk, but he was determined to be as strong and capable as possible. He even started mentoring other individuals with spinal cord injuries, finding purpose in helping others navigate the challenges he had faced. Zion, blissfully unaware of the trauma that had touched their lives, continued to grow and thrive. His first steps, his first words. Each milestone was a reminder of the joy and hope that still existed in their world. As summer faded into fall, Layla and Andre decided it to take another step in their healing journey. They organized a small gathering in their backyard, inviting close friends and family who had supported them through the darkest times. The afternoon was filled with the sound of laughter, the smell of barbecue, and the warmth of loved ones. As Layla watched Andre playing with Zion, their son's delighted giggles filling the air, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. Later, as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Layla stood to address their friends and family. Her voice shook slightly as she began to speak, but grew stronger with each word. "A few months ago, our world was shattered," she said. "We faced a nightmare that no family should ever have to endure. For a while, we weren't sure if we'd ever feel whole again." She paused, her eyes finding Andre's in the crowd. He nodded encouragingly, his love shining in his eyes. But standing here today, surrounded by all of you, I realize something. We are not defined by what happened to us. We are defined by how we chose to rise above it, by the love that carried us through the darkest nights and the strength we found in each other. Layla's gaze swept over the gathering, taking in the faces of those who had stood by them. We're here today not just to celebrate our healing, but to thank each and every one of you. Your support, your love, your unwavering belief in us, it made all the difference. As she spoke, Andre wheeled himself to her side, taking her hand in his. Together they faced their loved ones, a united front. We don't know what the future holds, Andre added, his deep voice carrying across the yard. But we know this, whatever comes our way, we'll face it together. Not just as a family, but as a community. As the gathering wound down and their guests began to leave, each offering hugs and words of encouragement, Layla and Andre found themselves alone on the porch. Zion had been put to bed, his soft snores drifting through the baby monitor. They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching as the last streaks of sunlight faded from the sky. The air was thick with the scent of late summer flowers and the promise of autumn. "We made it," Layla whispered, leaning her head on Andre's shoulder. Andre squeezed her hand gently. "We did, and we're stronger for it." As the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Layla and Andre shared a look of quiet understanding. They had been to the brink of despair and found their way back. They had faced their deepest fears and emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. Their story was far from over. There would be more challenges to face, more obstacles to overcome. But they would face them together, armed with a love that had been tested in fire and emerged stronger than ever. In the gentle quiet of the evening, as crickets began their nightly chorus, Layla and Andre held each other close. They had survived the darkest night of their lives. Now they were ready to embrace the dawn of a new day, filled with hope, strength, and the unbreakable bonds of family. For in the end, their story was not one of victimhood, but of triumph. Not of broken dreams, but of new beginnings. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of love. A reminder that even in the face of unimaginable adversity, hope can bloom, stronger and more beautiful than ever before. As they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, Layla and Andre knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. For they had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that true strength lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. And rise they had, stronger, braver, and more united than ever before.